So I finally finished watching season 6 of Arrow, and that means today we're going to stop and rank all 6 seasons of Arrow from the worst to the best. Now, before I give you my ranking, go ahead and tell me yours down below in the comment section. Tell me which ones you love, which ones you hate, which ones are right there in the middle, and go ahead and tell me why, especially if you really disagree with me, because it's a lot more interesting to talk about why we love or hate certain seasons than it is to just talk about which numbers we put next to them in our ranking. With that said, let's go ahead and get started. Coming in last place is going to be season 4. Unfortunately, there's just not much about this season that I enjoy, and there's no episodes from this season that I frequently go back and rewatch. Now, I appreciated the casting of Neil McDonough as Damien Dark. I like him as an actor. I had no problems with his portrayal of the character in the season. But him as an actual character, a villain on the show, I didn't think it fit quite right because it was so magic-based. It felt a little bit out of place. The show kind of tiptoes in that realm, and this went so far into it, I felt a little bit off, and then his scheme as the season went on just kind of got cartoonish. But really my big issue with this question is they started to ruin characters, in particular Felicity. In the early season, she was one of my favorite characters because of her witty rapport, her double entendres, her awkwardness with Oliver, and by this season, she's self-righteous, she's lecturing constantly, and it just sucked so much of the joy and the fun out of this show by transferring her in such an odd direction. And also, like, Laurel's death had no emotional punch when it happened because it felt rushed. It was very sudden as it happened. And then afterwards, because so many characters had been brought back to life before, there was kind of this wonder, is she really dead? Is she going to come back? And then by the time we realized, no, she's really dead, the punch had been taken out of the entire thing. So she dies with just kind of a whimper. So overall, this season just had nothing that really won me over. In 5th place is going to be season 6. Now, just so you know, I watched the first half of this season as it aired, and then the second half of the season I binge watched over this weekend as it appeared on Netflix. So when I was watching the first half of the season, I was actually digging it quite a bit. They had some interesting kind of character dynamics that they shifted to where Oliver's being investigated. He's got a son now. That's a little bit interesting. I love the actor Michael Emerson that played Caden James. So he was a nice addition to the show, kind of where they're going with that. Bringing back Deathstroke, always a nice touch. Then there was this big gap that I came up and I started rewatching the show just a few days ago. And the first 5 or so episodes I thought were dreadful. And I picked up right as Wild Dog had gone and had to testify against Oliver. And then this just kind of turned into, you don't trust us. Why don't you trust us? Well, you weren't behaving trustworthy. Someone was betrayed us. Well, you can't go against our honor. We're going to create our own team. Then there's this episode where Diggle freaks out because he finds out he's never going to get to be the Arrow. But it was just so strange to watch. Now, there are 5 episodes I didn't like, and then there was like the last 5 episodes where it really kind of went in on the Diaz plotline that I actually really liked it. As soon as Oliver was on his own and Diggle had quit and the other people had their own team and Oliver was alone, I dug it again. And they had this episode where it kind of told Diaz's story and he went on this little adventure. Favorite episode of the season. I thought it was a cool episode. Even the fight choreography, it was more John Wick style. So this was such a frustrating season because I dug the first half and then it ended really strong for me. And I like Diaz and I'm glad that it looks like he's going to be able to come back later on. And then there was this stretch in the middle that I found unwatchable. Like it was something that I could not believe how overcooked melodramatic things got. So this one comes in 5th place. Coming in at number 4 is going to be season 3. Now this season probably has the most ideas that I love, but also execution that I found frustrating. So right out of the gate that they brought Brandon Routh in, I loved that. Him as Ray Palmer was just a great casting, great addition to the show, really nice dynamic. I mean, I'm a Brandon Routh fan, so I just thought that was great to bring him in. And then beyond that, doing this League of Assassins, League of Shadows plotline with Ra's al Ghul, a great storyline to tell. And they kind of did, you kind of swapping out Bruce Wayne, put Oliver in the mix instead, and kind of this idea that Ra's al Ghul's looking for his replacement, and he finds it in Oliver Queen. But then there's a lot of bad things about this season as well. The first one that kind of comes to mind is that this is where you really started to feel one of the big problems of the show, which is everyone can become a superhero. And doesn't this undermine the credibility of the show when Oliver had to go to an island and be trained by assassins and kind of fight for his life to become a superhero? And then Laurel does 2 months of Krav Maga and she gets to join the team. It felt off. It didn't feel right and it strained some of the credibility. And then there's a big problem with the Ra's al Ghul storyline that in order to tell this story, they had to kind of have Oliver be a little bit off for the season, and then he fakes his death, and then he's gone, and then he's pretending as if he's joined the League of Assassins. And the end result of this is that for half the season, Oliver is checked out from the team. And one of the dynamics that makes the show work, that made me love the show, was his rapport with Felicity and with Diggle. And that main core dynamic that's fundamental to the show was lost for half the season. So this season has so many great ideas that could have been awesome, but the actual way it played out was a little bit underwhelming for me and made the show lose a little bit of its charm. Bringing us into the top 3 is going to be season 5. This is a season that has another set of great kind of ideas that they went with. Then one of the big ones is that Oliver becomes the mayor of the city, and this feels like a very interesting extension of what the show's always been about, that Oliver Queen is trying to save his city, and that looked like him as a vigilante at the beginning, and now it's kind of shifted. He's grown so much to this point in time that he wants to be mayor so that he can work in legal ways to try and fix this city and take it in the right direction. But beyond that, also as the vigilante aspect, by now it's converted into an actual hero that's trying to do the right thing. Now, the season also had several things that were pretty frustrating for me. One of the big ones is that once again, the season had so much lecturing going on. And Felicity, once again, is lecturing Oliver on trust, a major issue with the later seasons of the show, as well as his leadership with the new recruits. Then Oliver starts lecturing Felicity. She starts doing some hacker stuff, and he's lecturing her on, being a better person and being trustworthy. And that's not what I want to see Oliver doing. Then when Oliver becomes the coach of his team, he's lecturing them, and some of it gets so juvenile and silly the way it plays out. Also, with Prometheus, I felt the storyline was stretched out too long. I mean, he shows up in the first episode. It's not resolved until the last episode. And so it felt like we needed more breaks, diversions from just this character that shows up that's trying to make Oliver pay. And then as it's kind of revealed who it is, I felt the actor was kind of hammy in the portrayal. I just didn't buy it. I didn't view him as a mastermind. He's written as this guy that's ahead of the curve and always can figure things out as these master plans. But it always felt like screenwriter master plan, not like I thought this character actually felt smart. But a lot of great things about this season, great action sequences, a bunch of episodes that kind of stand out that I enjoyed quite a bit, but there's just a couple episodes with too much lecturing and with the main villain that held it back from being in those top 2 spots for me. Coming in second place as our runner-up is season 2. In a lot of ways for me, this is when the show was firing on all cylinders and classic Arrow, when it figured out its routine and it had that core trinity of Oliver, Diggle, and Felicity fighting crime together, and they'd have allies and different people they worked with that kind of came in at different times. So there's some neat little dynamics that played into it. But it was very much simplified in who our main characters were in the storyline. But at the same time, it also started to expand the world with little League of Assassin type things kind of working into the mix, characters coming back from the dead and kind of discovering this bigger picture of what is going on throughout the Arrowverse world. Also added in the mix, Deathstroke as our main villain. Such a cool character played by a cool actor, Manu Bennett, and getting to see kind of both sides to him as the friend and then the guy that goes completely insane that's out for revenge. It plays out really nicely. You get Summer Glau in the mix. Always fun to see her in different roles, and playing both as kind of the super villain fighter person towards the end, and then just as the person you're not quite sure where their alliances are in the middle of the story. For me, this is when the show had figured out what it was going to be, what the different types of dynamics were, and that they'd matured enough that it was in its stride, and that's why this is the runner-up for me. But for personal preference reasons, the best season of the Arrow for me was season number 1. Here's the deal. I'm a sucker for an origin story as watching things kind of get set up, and I like vigilante stories. And so that's what this season is. You have a guy coming back, and it's the origin story of a vigilante slowly turning into a hero along the way and meeting different people to join the team. I mean, I absolutely loved the rapport with Diggle in those first 4 episodes, and you didn't quite know where it was going, and they weren't partnered up just yet. He was supposed to be the bodyguard. He was trying to figure out what was going on. I mean, just the dynamic worked so nicely, and Diggle popped because I didn't know what they were going to do with the character, and I don't know if they knew what they were going to do with the character, but as an actor, he just had such kind of a screen presence to him that you wanted to see more of them interacting with one another. Right out of the gate on the show, what I loved is that it went for it. Every episode ended with a big, gigantic twist, a turn. Oliver's arrested like they play this major card in the first 4 episodes of the show, and just they weren't afraid to take big risks like that along the way. And then as they were kind of discovering who our side characters would be, they add Felicity into the mix, and she wasn't intended to be a main cast member. But she had such great rapport and these double entendres, and her timing and chemistry with Oliver were so good that she just became a major part of the show. Those sorts of just storytelling magic and casting magic that just happened, you have a lot of that in this season as the show kind of came together. Add into the mix John Barrowman as Malcolm Merlin, and you've got a great villain. And this season to me always kind of felt very Batman Begins-y, and that's good. A season of Batman Begins for me. I am totally on board. So all in all, this is a season that I love. This is the one that I kind of go back and rewatch the most. Some of that's because it's also the one that's been on the longest, but at the same time, the episodes there's like episode 16 or 17 where Oliver first reveals to Felicity that he is the Arrow. Cool episode. So this for me is the best season of Arrow, my personal favorite, followed very closely by season 2. They are a great 1-2 punch in my mind. And then it got too lectury in the last 4 seasons, unfortunately. Anyway, that's my take on the show Arrow. How about you? How do you rank the seasons? Go ahead and tell me down below in the comment section. And remember, if you're mad at me about my placement of things, don't just tell me which number you're angry about. Tell me why, because why is a lot more interesting than what number I put next to something, and a lot easier to have a nice, fun, lively discussion about it. And if you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I do movie reviews, TV reviews, ranking videos, but the key thing is I don't want to just talk about movies and TV shows. I want to talk about them with you. So please join me in the comment section. Let's have a nice, lively discussion about the show Arrow, one of my favorite shows when it's firing on all cylinders. And as always, thank you for watching.